The topic tonight is, for those of you who are savvy, is called Dukkha and Sukha. The Siamese twins joined in your mind, through your mind, Dukkha and Sukha. And in terms of sort of plain English, we're talking about stress and anxiety on the one hand, underlying ill-at-easeness that we might experience, and Sukha being happiness, joy, ease. So these are, as I started thinking about what to talk about to a lot of the people who are chiming in on the Creative Live workshop, it occurred to me that these are probably, if you simplify it, reduce it, and take any kind of jargon out of it, this is probably what most people are working with who want to get interested in meditation, some kind of way to work with what they would call, what we would call stress and anxiety. So we're sort of retranslating, we're talking about something that the Buddhists would call the first noble truth, which is interesting. It's sort of the Buddha, after he became enlightened, supposedly gave a teaching, and the very first teaching that he gave was called the Four Noble Truths. And first one being truth of suffering, but that word really could be understood and has been understood as more like an underlying anxiety or ill-at-easeness about our whole existence that manifests in a lot of different ways. Obviously, the grossest version of it is we don't know how long we have to be here. So there's a fundamental kind of anxiety about our own survival that is very primordial, very basic. And then all kinds of things that we feel we might lose. Even if we have good experience, we might lose it. If we have a poor experience, it might stay with us, So the idea of getting what we don't want, not getting what we want, all these things we've discussed before. But looking at it tonight through a different lens, just talking about simple experience of stress and anxiety as kind of just the words, the way they conjure up meaning for us in our everyday life, and just looking at those experiences, correlating them to the first noble truth. And then the other experience to take a direct look at, which I thought people might be interested in, is happiness and joy, which really is a powerful topic to talk about, because we have so many ideas about it and so much attachment to those ideas, that to really look through the lens of kind of clear mind and see what it is that really produces true, and you could say more kind of stable happiness and enjoyment, as opposed to kind of temporary buzz situations that then produce more craving as they go by. So we're going to try to distinguish happiness from sort of spiritual point of view, as opposed to just going after things which give us temporary pleasure. We're not really talking about that. We're talking about real, genuine well-being and freedom, in a sense, from relying too much on sort of bump-ups in our state of mind that will maybe crash later. But how can we establish some kind of real ground of well-being? So that would be the third noble truth, in the Buddhist teachings. That's the correlation. Now we're going to leave that behind and just look for a moment at these simple experiences from a meditative point of view. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, what does it mean to look at something in a meditative way or contemplative way? And there's several things to establish. The first thing is, how do you look at something? You put your mind onto it, and that's called gong in Tibetan. We've talked about that before, or meditation. So that's a generally pervasive notion of meditation, that somehow we train our mind to look at something, to explore something, to become familiar with something in particular. So in this case, we're going to use that meditative mind, or that contemplative talent that we've developed, skill set that we've developed, to look directly at our own personal experience of anxiety and stress, not from an analytic point of view, or a kind of manipulative point of view, but from a deeply experiential observation kind of approach. And I'm going to, sort of suggest a way to go about that that's going to be learning, in a sense, a new contemplative practice tonight. And then the other approach is looking at directly at the experience, whatever experience we've had of happiness, joy, and freedom, and also becoming familiar with what that feels like to us. What is the texture of that when we have that kind of feeling that we'd identify in that way. So we're going to leave alone the idea of trying to favor one or the other for the time being. Ordinarily, we're very, very fast on the draw to get rid of the suffering and attach to what we think of the happiness thing. And so we haven't really, in a lot of cases, taken the time to actually experience what we're experiencing and touch in on the sensations that we have and the feelings that we have, which we characterize in those two ways. So the general umbrella is going to be exploration and discernment, or prajna, to just look. And it's going to require a slowing down of our idea stream and dropping into a kind of direct perception space at the three levels of the body, the speech, or emotions, and the mind. And so the practice itself that we're going to do will take us down into ourselves in the experiential way, and hopefully we have a chance to get a little bit more familiar with these two very profound dimensions of our experience, which seem to occupy so much of our conscious attention, either trying to avoid stress and anxiety, or attach ourselves to what we consider to be happiness and joy, or the other way around. If you look at what people are doing, you might be convinced it's just kind of the other way around. We spend a lot of time attaching ourselves to the experience of stress and anxiety, and not that much time really cultivating and attaching ourselves to the notion of what it is that would actually make us happy. So that's a funny thing to look into as well as we go forward with this. So that's the first thing, is that if we don't have a meditative ground in the sense of cultivating basic shamatha or mindfulness, it's going to be much harder to do this practice, this contemplative practice, or for that matter, any contemplative practice, or for that matter, any kind of visualization, sadhana type of practice. If we don't have sort of fundamental ground of shamatha meditation, it's going to be hard to hold our mind to anything, even a task at hand, or making breakfast, for that matter, taking a shower. So this still, we'll always go back and back and back to this fundamental ground of developing the capacity to train our mind to be more attentive and more awake and more present with whatever it is that we're doing. Then we're going to direct that mind that's now a little bit more stable towards investigating some dimension of our experience, with the two outcomes of developing insight or becoming more familiar with a positive kind of experience, like loving kindness or happiness, or compassion. So we have the insight dimension of the contemplative meditation, and we have the cultivation part, both sitting on the ground, the strong ground of good, stable mind that we've cultivated through mindfulness practice. So, it's not actually full exploration of the teachings of the Buddha to just simply develop mindfulness and say that's the whole thing. But mindfulness as shamatha and insight as vipassana, kind of those two dimensions come together, as we've talked about many times in the past. So mindfulness is great, but it's a platform for developing a clearer relationship with our own mind and the world around us. and also developing virtue, good qualities we ourselves would like to develop, not because it's in a book or something, but because we like those qualities genuinely. So that's the first point. And then the general dimension of what we're talking about, in a way, is also still based on mindfulness, what we're going to be talking about stress and anxiety, which is mindfulness of feeling. Like, I'm struck by this over and over again. If you ask somebody, how are you? Which I've sort of taken to doing at the beginning of workshops sometimes, and people will report in and say how they were over the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of days, or the last couple of hours. But it's not so easy for us to figure out and feel how we are exactly right now. And it's very valuable. It might seem trivial, but it's very valuable that we can have that kind of sensing, that kind of ability to sense, feel our own makeup in a way. And it's broken down traditionally into the three dimensions of what's called body, speech, and mind. To be clear about it, we're going to look at those as the body is simply the sensations in the physical body. What happens when we become aware of those? You know, you are living in that body. You know, that body is you. And so a lot of times we're not in touch with that. You know, we're not really sensing our own body, so we are missing a lot of information. We're sort of working more in the mind level sometimes. Then the next level from the body, and we're going to start from the ground up, is the emotional body, or it's called speech, but it's really Sambhogakaya level of the kind of energy of emotions. You know, like if you feel angry or sad or frightened, peaceful. Those are feelings. Of course, the body's going to reflect those things, and a body that feels peaceful actually looks different than a body that's angry. But to some extent, those energies sort of function at their own level, and we're going through those energies all day, even in the nighttime, in the dreams and stuff. The energetic body or the emotional body is sort of processing and experiencing, you could say. And we're also not sometimes that in touch with that dimension of ourselves, right? So that's another dimension. Somebody could be, you know, kind of physically very grounded and experienced, but maybe their emotional world is unknown to them or less known to them. So this is all about us, so we have to just think about ourselves here a little bit in this kind of practice. And then finally, at the level of mind, you know, what we're talking about is really the dimension of mind that is more abstract either than the physical body or the emotional body, but also is processing kind of thoughts, which are like little film strips, right? They're like the ticker tape that's running across the bottom of CNN when it's broadcasting, you know, telling you that here's what happened in the sport, the commentating mind, making comments. So that mind gets occupied in particular ways, and all three of these dimensions, the body, speech, and mind, have strong power and, you know, kind of capacity to experience very vivid and intense direction to reality, connection to reality, or they also have the capacity to store different experiences in different ways and create very powerful habitual patterns that we relive over and over again. And, you know, one of my students said a brilliant thing. She said when she was meditating, she realized she did not have the really capacity at the body energy level to distinguish between an experience that was happening right now or something from the past. In other words, if you get a thought up of being angry at somebody, angry at your boss, or one of your exes or something like that, it's as if it's happening now as far as your body and emotions are concerned, which was a very astute comment, I thought, a very interesting comment. So the mind is very powerful in that it's conjuring things up for us, and then in a sense it's dragging the body and the emotional body along with it. So of course, when we work on meditation and look at those thoughts and so forth, it's a very potent way to understand how we get entrapped, how we get stuck into loops and patterns and things like that. Even just when you recognize thinking and so forth, you say, oh goodness, I'm running a tape here, and it's taking my body and an emotional body along with it. So even to the point where you might be remembering an experience you had that you're not having now, being held at knife point, let's say, and you start to get short of breath just by thinking about it, right? So that's very potent. The mind is very powerful that way. So looking at those three dimensions of our being, they can either be captured in a sense, which is, I think, when they're captured and when they're stuck and when they're in a repeat mode, and when there's a lot of fear, we can experience what probably many of us would call anxiety or stress. We're playing something over and over and over, and it's capturing the body's energy and making the body feel tight and tense. And it's also capturing the emotions and capturing the mind in the sense of a repeated cycle of thoughts that are very familiar. So, and when we experience happiness, on the other hand, or joy or freedom, there's maybe a sense of not doing that. Like Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, the 2,000-year-old man, and there was one character he played, Dr. Hal Danish, and he said he had a patient who came in and used to tear paper, sort of nervously tear paper, and so Carl Reiner said, what did you tell him? What did you say to him? He said, I told him, stop tearing paper. Don't do that. So that's why, in a sense, the liberation of the happiness is a cessation, in a way, of this activity of the mind in which we're capturing the emotional body and the physical body hostage. And if we don't do that, we experience a certain more spontaneous, open state, which could be called sukha, ease. But the whole point of tonight's program is to look at directly, as if we had the capacity to ourselves liberate ourselves, and with the assumption that we can't really count on anybody else to do it, actually, and we can count on all kinds of friends to give us feedback and maybe some instructions and so forth. But in the sense of how this goes, obviously, even the Buddha, even the great gurus, they talk about putting the Buddha in the palm of your hand, but they can't. It's not a suppository or a pill that anybody can give you. So be placed in the palm of your hand. At that point, we each have to sort of take our own counsel in terms of seeing the truth of any of these points and how we can work with it ourselves. So the first important point is that if we're looking at experience of stress and anxiety, if we're in denial about that, we have not even recognized the First Noble Truth. If we're saying, I'm fine, everything's fine, this is a fairly ordinary approach, and the metaphor I'd like to use is like when you make concrete to make a city, they put concrete over nature. I don't know if you noticed this ever, but the whole city is unnatural, and there's everything natural is covered over with concrete. It's a pretty heavy deal to do to nature, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. It allows the human realm to kind of really become very busy and active, but we're sort of we can't even feel the ground underneath us. And so in a like way, if we can't relate to our own organic quality as a living being, it's like we pour a layer of concrete or maybe plastic or paint, shellac, whatever, finish over our organic being. But even so, it's still wants to poke up. So if you walk around the city, like if nobody takes care of these things, little plants start to pop up in the cracks in the concrete, which in this metaphor is our own sort of organic quality of the direct experience of life coming through any attempt to kind of whitewash or suppress or cover it over. And that liberates us to at least look at the truth of the First Noble Truth, which is a fundamental sense of stress and anxiety that's pervasive in our lives, underlying, or ill at ease quality. If we can't tap that, probably the rest of this talk and this practice will be irrelevant in a sense, because we're all starting from the point of saying, yes, we do have this experience of stress and anxiety. It's not fun for us. We're looking for some kind of re-syncing up or relief or release, you could say, from being from torturing ourselves in this way over and over again. So that's the main point of where we start from. Is it's not a point of denial. It's not a point of like emphasizing anything particular. It's just looking at our experience and seeing what the quality is that we're working with. And from the point of view of tonight, I'm saying we're working with two main qualities. One is this experience of stress and anxiety. The other is this feeling of relief or ease or happiness or joy. And just to take a fresh look tonight together at these two things is the point. I'll pause for a minute here. I see a lot of more people have come online in the meantime. So if you're just joining us and you want to participate while we're live, of course, if you're watching the archived talks, you'll just see those, but you won't. You'll hear me talk about them, but you won't be able to see them streaming. You won't be able to participate. So, but if you are live right now, what you can do is just open a second window in your browser, go to facebook.com/DavidNickTurn, and that's where you should place your comments and questions going forward. So I see quite a lot of our wonderful gang. Beth is there, and Marcia from Rome at 1 in the morning, having a little early morning dharma, and quite a few others. So some of you are saying it's good to see me back, and I'm agreeing because I missed doing this. Had a great time doing what I'm doing, but this has been a very wonderful way to get together with everybody. And Joe from Wyoming is saying he's getting his sukkah on, so that's good. Yeah, Barnaby, this is the right place to post, so I do see your post if you're joining in, and greetings to you, hello. So if you're just joining us in, as Barnaby said, if you post right there where you see these comments, I will see them. Sometimes they don't come through, so I apologize for that. We don't have any control over that. But don't post them underneath the video broadcast. Post them separately onto the second window that we have. And as I mentioned, Seth has told you where you can link up. There's a link there that you can see all the comments on one page. So, having laid that ground, what I'm hoping to do is introduce this contemplation, which is, in a sense, based on traditional principles, but in a sense is a sort of specific focusing on two very powerful experiences that we have, with the intention of just simply relaxing and seeing what it feels like. So the tricky part of this is a lot of us are used to being off to the races with analysis and trying to assess our experience, characterize our experience, manipulate our experience, but we're not going to be doing that yet in this exercise. So keeping in mind the GOM, or becoming familiar with, we're just simply taking some time to become more familiar with the experiences that we call stress and anxiety, and what actually are we experiencing. Not what we read about, not the clinical version of any of these things. Just take whatever you think it is, the experience of stress, if that has meaning for you, and we're going to do a little conjuring through a contemplative practice, and then we're going to do the same thing with the happiness and joy experience. So, if you're game, I hope everybody's game. This is going to be a little bit like a guided meditation online. So there may be some pauses, and if you don't hear me speaking, it doesn't mean we're off the air. So I'm going to invite everybody to try this practice tonight, and then hopefully the rest of the time we'll get a chance to discuss, if anything, there's any sort of insightful quality that comes through, anything interesting. So the first thing in the contemplative practice is take a good seat. So wherever you are, if you can, take your meditation seat, if that's a cushion on the floor or in the chair where you are, but actually have a sense of, taking your posture, taking your seat as if you were doing shamatha meditation, mindfulness meditation. And then I think borrowing from Thich Nhat Hanh community and others as well, just take 3 mindful breaths. So this is just a way to settle your consciousness down a little bit, settle your mind down a little bit, and settle into yourself a little bit, and just breathe in and out 3 times with a sort of awareness directed towards the experience of the breathing. And then settling into your body and look around where you are, see where you are, and then settle down further into your body and sensations that are in your body. You might feel your skin and your organs and your butt, your feet on the ground. You might feel muscles, nerves, whatever sensations are happening. We're going to tune into the body for a moment, our body. And just see how that feels right now. What does that feel like? Take note. And then we're going to, just like you would in the loving kindness meditation, we're going to bring something to mind so that we can kind of conjure the experience of it. In this case, just simply think of a time recently, or not, doesn't really matter, when you were stressed out. And what did that? We're going to sort of try to re-inhabit that experience, just like as if this came up during meditation. But specifically think of a particular time when you were stressed out or anxious. Don't be afraid, because we're doing this in a safe way now. Nobody's, whatever it was that was threatening us then is not here now. So we have what Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche calls the eyes of wisdom with us. We're just looking at the experience sort of in a peaceful way. But try to conjure up that feeling with a specific memory. And just whatever the first thing that comes up is. So you should have an experience in your mind now. And with that experience in your mind, move into the body level, because it's as if it's happening now. And do a scan of the body. And sort of start at the head, and how does your head feel, your scalp feel? And your eyes. Your nose. There might be an overall feeling tone, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Now first we're just working with the body. And the jaw, mouth, Where is your tongue? Throat? Neck? What kind of feelings are going on in there? And your shoulders? Again, try to, if you drift, just like in Maitri meditation, just bring your mind back to this feeling of stress and anxiety. Here, we're visiting it by choice now. Okay? So that's the eyes of wisdom. We're choosing to go there. And we're seeing what it does to our body. And then moving into the chest area and the heart. What are we feeling? Stomach. Gut. I'm doing this along with you, so we're all doing it together. And moving into the pelvic area. And now to the legs. And finally the feet. So we're inhabiting a particular experience we've had in the past that was stressful, anxiety-provoking, and we're sort of there with it, reliving it, or trying to reconjure it, keeping our mind into that space. And then with our wisdom mind, we're just looking at our body, what's happening to our body, without trying to change anything of it, just see what we can learn. And then secondly, we're going to go, if emotions come up, we're going to look at those now, because the body and the emotions are obviously very connected. So now we're looking at the emotional body. So sometimes elements might come up here, kind of fire or heat or windy quality, or also sometimes animal energies might come up, because sometimes we think of animals as inhabiting certain types of feelings and energies. Or else you could find another way of describing what's happening to you, but really at the less tangible level of feeling, what are you feeling? Again, returning into this space in which you're experiencing the stress and anxiety. What are you feeling? And where are you feeling it? How are you feeling it? How are you experiencing that? And again, not trying to get rid of it, not trying to block it, not trying to analyze it, just feel it. This is a feeling exercise. So now, moving into the mind realm, still we're in this hologram of this experience, sort of like on the holodeck, and we've reprogrammed this experience. Now, what is happening in your mind? And that could take the form of thoughts. Usually it does. That's how we experience our mind. Could be something more abstract, but what are you thinking? What thoughts are running through your mind? Not now, but then. And the thoughts might also be connected to feelings. So they might have a sort of colored quality. What are you experiencing? And so now just release that whole experience just as we would in the loving kindness meditation. Just let it go. And hopefully you made some mental notes. If you like, when you're doing this, you could write them down. Maybe better not to get too much journaling going on, better after the practice to just write it down. But that could be very helpful, actually, so you can remember some of the things that come up for you. And just like in the loving kindness meditation, if certain things come up, like that are extraneous to the practice, just note that and just bring your mind back in. And not to censor or try to manipulate it. So just whatever arises could be interesting. So if you're just joining us, we're doing a contemplative practice based on stress and anxiety, which we just went through that one. So if you missed that, you could go back and watch the archive and go through that one. And then the second practice that we're going to do now, second half, is conjuring up, bringing to mind an experience of joy, happiness, and freedom. And just as a reference point, when the Buddha was practicing really, really hard, at a certain point, his practice did not yield fruit because he was just digging himself in deeper and deeper into a kind of tight approach towards practice. He had a flash memory at that point of his childhood. And supposedly he was able to then open and relax in a way just because the texture or feeling of that memory gave him some clue about his sort of open-hearted, original quality of joy and freedom. And that's when he sort of was able to lighten up a little bit. It's a funny idea thinking of that, but it's in the text there. Memories of summer as a child. So you could go back to your childhood if you have to go back that far. That's fine. Maybe you didn't have a happy childhood, but maybe certain things, maybe you weren't happy in your home, but you would go to an uncle's house and be happy there. Or it could be something recent that happened, something that makes you feel joyful and happy. And again, conjuring up that experience, just pick one little holographic experience and just bring it into your mind. Give yourself time if you need to. Just remember what that feels like. Don't be so critical or cynical about this. We do experience happiness. Everybody in this virtual space has had some experience in which they say, I'm happy, I have peace, ease, well-being. So if you have that experience, bring that to mind. And we're going to do the same body scan. Now, if you start to feel ill at ease, I'm going to call that an invasion from the other practice, a raid. And they want to come in and take over this practice and say, well, no, really, you're not that comfortable, you're not at ease. But when you're having this experience, they weren't invading and they weren't raiding, and that's probably a big part of why you could have it. So just to open up your experience, and if they do raid, you can just tell them, I've already given you your due, and I'm going to see you again later. But right now I'm in this other space. And so just invite them to retreat and come back later if they must, So now, with that in mind, that happy experience that you're working with, you could do the body scan. How does your head feel? How does your forehead feel? Your eyes? Try to stay in the experience. Your nose, your mouth, your jaw, throat, your shoulders, your chest and heart center. What's going on there? Again, you're inside a particular experience right now, and you're using your mindfulness to stay in that space that you've conjured. And now you're scanning your body, not now, but in that space. Your body had a certain feeling to it. And your muscles, your bones, your stomach, your pelvic area, legs, feet, It's okay to really conjure here. This is part of this kind of practice. And then be mindful of the feeling in the body as you're conjuring that experience of happiness, particular experience, joy or freedom. And then going into the emotional body, there's a certain elemental quality to it, as we mentioned. Certain energetic quality. You could experience it as a sort of force of nature. Some experience from the natural world. Just to really see, how did you feel? You can give it words, that's okay. Maybe you felt thrilled, maybe you felt relaxed, at ease, powerful, ecstatic, relieved, excited, whatever comes up for you. Scared. It's an interesting thought. And then finally, in the mind, what are you experiencing? What thoughts are arising? Again, bringing your mind back to this experience of happiness and joy. What mind events are happening? What are you thinking about? There might be no thoughts. Mind might feel very open. You might start feeling the raid coming in from the stress and anxiety side, trying to invade this experience. Mind might have certain thoughts like, I really like this, want more of this. What are you thinking about? And then again, just to relax your experience now, and come out of this contemplation. Let's take the 3 mindful breaths again, and release the practice completely. Just let it go. We don't hold on to the content, but if you did take note of any of it, now we can have a discussion based on that. So if you would, go to facebook.com/David Nickturn in the second window in your browser, and we'll spend the remaining time that we have discussing this practice, this new practice. And you may have just gotten a taste of it. It's possible that, afterwards you might want to do it some more. It only takes 10 minutes to do the whole thing. And so anyhow, if you have comments or questions, can you please write them in now, and let's try to, address some of those going forward here to close out our session together. Let's see what people are saying. There's some comments, so hopefully some of you have had a chance. If you haven't had a chance, write them in. Metamorphose, hi, I found you through Creative Live and been trying to catch up via your Ustream archives. So yeah, those, if you just go to Ustream.com and then look up my channel, they're all there. But we'll post a link at the end of this on Facebook here. I'll post a link, or Seth, could you do that? Post a link for both me seeing this talk and also for the archives. So there's quite a few talks there for those of you who are new. So I see Colin and Catherine Sanford joining from Greenwich. That was Catherine who said that comment about, I don't know, I can't distinguish between how the body can be commandeered by the mind in terms of reliving experience. So thanks for that thought, Catherine. I told you I was going to run with that, and I did. Okay, Neely is saying, when I click on the link for all the comments on a page, it is broken. Seth, could you see what the deal is with that? If that's the case, just come back here and just open a second window as we're doing. So here's a few comments. Beth is saying, I recognize stress and anxiety by my constant thinking. When meditating, it takes quite a while to slow it down. Yeah, sure, the engine. But we're looking, Beth, tonight at sort of some of the other components of stress and anxiety, the body component and the emotional components. And meditating, in a way, is sort of becoming familiar with all of that, as we've talked about in the past, not just the mental content, all three levels. So if you do the body scan, it might sort of settle you down a little bit, see where you are physically, how you're feeling physically. Don't not be afraid to touch in on your body that way. And also in this case, practice is also liberating in the sense that we're not trying to change that or calm down particularly. We're saying, what is that experience? What's beneath that experience? Maybe the constant thinking is part of it, but it may not be the whole thing. So we're looking in a kind of more complete kind of way. Claudia's saying, nice fall pumpkin shirt. Yeah, I guess it's sort of a Halloween shirt. I should have black on it too. That's funny. Let's see if there's any. Okay, Marcia is saying, I love the metaphor of a little plant popping up out of the concrete. I painted that when I was a kid. Cool. Laurel is saying, loving this, but must drive to yoga class now. We'll watch the rest later this evening. We'll take this calmness with me in the car. Thank you, David, and everyone. Cute. Hi, Shayna. Shayna's out there. Okay. Elizabeth Titus Rexford is saying, it seems selfish to focus on our own happiness, doesn't it? So that's an interesting comment. Of course, if that's all we were doing, and if our happiness was in fact separate from everybody else and our relationship with everybody else, yeah, that could be really selfish. But the odd thing is that if we're not happy, if we haven't connected with our own well-being, whatever we wish for others is gonna kind of, well, first off, best I'd be like a fart in a windstorm, and somehow the ground of our own well-being is so important to establish if we really do want to achieve happiness for the benefit of others. We still have to do this work, and if we're ill at ease and kind of out of sync, and we haven't settled that down, probably it's going to be not so easy to manifest that kind of loving kindness that we want to manifest for others. So I see Justine. Hi, Justine. Good to see you again. Wow, everybody's back. It's so cool. So again, this is the time to write in based on the experience we just had, the contemplative practice relating to stress and anxiety and happiness on the other side, and joy. And let's look and see. I see more comments are coming in. So let's see if we can't grab some of those and get some conversation going. So Pam Katz Reed, during the first meditation, my throat and heart were closed tight. During the second part, heart felt open, a flower opening. Thank you. Yeah, I think that, many people might experience something in that way, at least as we've tried it so far. Kristen, hello from upstate New York, hello. Marianne Marquez is saying, there was surprising anger with stress. I felt an open-mouthed tiger leaping out of my chest. When I was happy, my heart felt full and open at the same time. Yeah, interesting. Again, we're not trying to program anybody's experience here. That's sort of, we're not, I would say, just as a way of doing these practices, always do them together and without bias, because there's as much power and wisdom in our stress and anxiety as there is in our happiness. That's the kind of hidden transmission, is that we're going to learn from both aspects of this practice. So we don't have to be afraid of either one. Sometimes we're afraid to experience happiness. People have that kind of feeling. It seems guilt comes up, or selfishness, or whatever. So Marilyn says, conjuring the sukha experience did have some elements of dukkha too. Yeah, I found that too. That's interesting. But overall, I found it a gentle smile on my face throughout. Sweet. So Neely is saying, and this is an important one, I have some chronic pain, and doing the body scan in connection to a specific emotion, I find I first have to get around the pain being there. I almost gave up on the joy one, but then I actually did manage to conjure the experience pretty well. I was only distracted by the pain when scanning the parts that hurt, which is the mouth and neck area. The joy experiences I recalled were pre-chronic pain. Okay, so that's pretty specific, Neely. That's you should use this as it works for you to explore these things. So we don't want to compound anything that's giving you trouble, but maybe a sense of just learning a little bit more about how your mind is working with the physical situation, because obviously that's a double-decker bus there. You have the physical situation, but then you have how you can work with it, what resources you can bring to bear. So you do that in your own creative way, okay? Beth is saying, I usually am irritable toward others with how uncomfortable anxiety can be. Having to sit through it, the tears were streaming down. Wow. Okay. Again, if this is coming up like the loving kindness practice, this might bring up we're working with the emotions here, the feeling sense, not just the mind. So that's okay. And just remember, we're looking with the eyes of wisdom, as Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche talked about it. So we're not simply at the mercy of these things, but we have some ability to look at them clearly and experience it, re-experience those things, and whatever emotion comes up, look at it as a purification, something that is coming through you that is sort of clarifying itself as it goes. So we have time for maybe 3 or 4 more comments, and then I think if people choose to work with this practice this way, this particular contemplation, I'm going to be working with this with people because it seemed to be fruitful, and for myself it seems fruitful, interesting. So if you feel like working with it, and then we can just sort of stay in touch about it. But again, like anything else, don't hurt yourself. Don't do anything injurious to yourself. Look at it as a way of being kind to yourself and simply curious and exploring. So let's look at Barnaby and Marie in that order. Barnaby's saying, when I sit with stress and anxiety, it's like a frozen river being thawed out. There's those deep, low, muffled cracks of big chunks deep inside. Feels like organs shifting. Then there are the surface cracks, like darts of needle-like pain shooting around on the surface. Then breath flows like water flowing under the ice. Then warmth. Then a series of emotions, I assume. Good, bad, happy, sad, and then calm, calmer. Like the river has thawed out the ice and first rush of the black water is over. The river just flows, river of emotions, not being able to tell the difference between pain or joy. Feelings only become real when I try to define them. It's like one taste, and my breath is the boat on the water. I may be in pain, but I'm joyful about it. Or I may feel warm and tingly, but I may be crying all the same. Great, Barnaby. Very, very rich and very poetic there. So, yeah, this is just sort of us talking about our experience this way. That's great. So Marie is saying, so good. Notice the anxiety brought up so many uncomfortable, tight sensations that I usually into my mind to calm myself. Not sure what that means. And so that's what I do, and ultimately crack because I'm running. Not just being with it and with happiness. Notice that the thrill and excitement were very close to fear. Almost can't contain that too. Very helpful to really see how I need to work with it. Okay? I think there's a few, Maria, I think there might be a few nouns or verbs missing there, but I get the drift, okay? So we're sort of almost at the end of our time. Let's see if there's 1 or 2 more that we can talk about, and then we'll sum it up. Maybe you could write and let me know if this was seemed fruitful or interesting as a practice, as a variation on contemplative meditation for you. I'm curious because If it is, then we can keep working with it. So Monica wrote back to Elizabeth, which is another thing you guys can do is we say, take it offline. If there's somebody you want to communicate with further, you can through Facebook continue that conversation. Monica is saying to Elizabeth's comment, I think our happiness, if we can find it, is not selfish, but lets us feel the inner abundance we need to offer generosity out into the world and to take care of others without feeling depleted. Well, that's very elegantly stated, Monica. Well said. So Elizabeth also said, feeling stress, my throat and chest were tight. Emotions. Then I felt very sad and I had tears in my eyes. My mind said, this is not fair. I should not have the bad situation that causes me stress. Yeah, that's a good one. Not fair. Shouldn't have this happen. And maybe we'll close with this one from Sheila. The stress, anxiety, visualization felt very familiar. Tightness and a closed feeling. Physical pain. The happiness half felt more foreign and also more open. A sense of possibility. When I first got to the happy half, I felt like tearful and tender-hearted. So great. Okay. So I see people are commenting to each other. Thank you all so much for going on the ride. It is a little bit of a ride, and we are basically taking, just to anchor this, the experience of First Noble Truth, which we're sort of saying has the quality of stress and anxiety, and sometimes translated as suffering or confusion. And Third Noble Truth, which is the cessation of the same, which is called nirvana, or in this case we're using the word sukha, maybe not a totally complete as the notion of nirvana, which is sort of has a kind of quality of permanent cessation, but sukha, the temporary sensation of this kind of stress and anxiety, and we feel some kind of ease and joy and happiness. And these are two important experiences as far as I'm concerned, not so much to characterize and analyze, but to recognize as part of our life as a human being, and that we can give ourselves the gift of just removing a layer of kind of conceptualization around it and actually experiencing our life in this way. See what fruit comes up, and always then dissolve into just kind of open feeling of awareness and presence. Start there and dissolve into that. So I think that's all we have time for tonight, and very powerful feeling in my chest of warm from you guys showing up after 3 weeks, and almost everybody's back, and there's some new faces too. So great to share this with you and keep the conversation going. I do want to say a couple of things coming up, which is that I'm going to lead an immersion, a meditation immersion at Kripalu from November 10th to 15th. Some of you are coming. I hope more of you can come so that we get a chance to really practice a little bit more tangibly together and talk in more depth and more length about all these things. So that'll be great. If you can go to kripalu.org, you can find out about that workshop and sign up if you can come. I recognize that it's a whole week. It's 5 days during the week. That's hard for people to get away. But it also has the advantage of being a little bit deeper, going into these things a little bit deeper. And then if you're in the virtual realm, I just have this 3-day workshop that you can download from creativelive.com. And that's where some of this stuff sort of came up the first time, and general comments about meditation practice with a live audience and an online audience. So you can download those and look at those as you like, creativelive.com. So, and again, as usual, if you have any sort of questions or comments, drop me a note on Facebook or davidnickturn@gmail.com. And best wishes for your practice and, the development of your wisdom and compassion for yourself and others. That's what we're trying to do here. So that's all we're trying to do here, actually. So, see you next Tuesday. I will be back. If anybody has a great idea for a topic, let me know, okay? And we'll be back online and trying to stay regular as much as we can. And see you then. Okay. Night, everybody.